Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Cycles of Time podcast. This week's vibe is an extreme solstice and the beginning of Cancer season. And this is your cosmic energy report for June 16th to 22nd, 2025. So how's everybody doing out there? What a big weekend we just had. We had a Uranus-Mars square and a Jupiter-Saturn square. So some pretty poignant planets coming kind of head to head in this tense aspects over the weekend. And those influences will continue to affect us throughout the week, as Uranus is a slow-moving planet, as is Jupiter and Saturn. So they're all kind of moving out of their exact placement, but continuing to affect us. And I feel like we're in the midst right now, astrologically, of feeling both the lightning bolts of kind of explosive unrest and also this kind of deeper wisdom that in order to expand beyond our current situation, we have to take responsibility for where we currently are in the present moment and act on that. So Jupiter just entered Cancer last week, as I talked about in last week's episode, and I'm wondering if y'all are feeling any different now that this benevolent friend or expansive friend, Jove, up in the sky, has entered this watery realm of the crab. I definitely do feel a bit different. It's this transit that a lot of people have been quite excited about as like a positive transit of 2025. And so it had a lot of hype around it. I wrote an article about Jupiter in Cancer through the rising signs and got a lot of likes and comments and feedback and engagement with that post, because I think people are just really craving a little bit of juice right now in the world. And Jupiter in Cancer, where it's exalted and happy, feels like maybe that's a little bit of the balm or salve that we've been waiting for. And I didn't want to have my hopes up too much because, of course, Jupiter enters Cancer and immediately makes a square to Saturn and then Neptune later this week. And so there's definitely, it's never easy. You can never take a single transit in isolation. But I have felt, when we think about Jupiter in Cancer as kind of this place where there's a certain fertility and there's a certain care and nurturance that's being expanded upon, I definitely am feeling that in my life and in the larger world, at least at this current moment. I spent Father's Day yesterday, as I record this early Monday morning. I spent Father's Day with my daughter and my current partner, her stepdad, and my ex-husband, her dad, and his new partner. And it really was such a beautiful day spent together, seeing her just filled with love for multiple dads. And it was just a really beautiful experience. And the sign of Cancer centers on our sense of home and family and lineage and care and nurturance. So it seems like Jupiter in Cancer really has, for me, expanded my idea of what home and family and care can feel like kind of immediately. I was a little nervous about this meetup, but it's all going really well. And it feels like everyone's just really centered on care and family in this little unit. And so it's been very sweet. And I hope you had a good Father's Day, however you spent it, fathers or not involved. But yeah, for me, it was kind of an unexpected Jupiter in Cancer kind of feeling of like expansive possibility. And also last weekend, despite the fact that there are still so many truly horrible, awful things happening in the world every moment, I'm taking this moment to acknowledge how proud I am of all of the Americans who showed up for the No Kings protests and went into the streets with passion over the weekend. I feel like there's still so much that really needs to be enacted and changed in the larger scope of things. We can't just focus on kings. It has to be focused on the larger picture of billionaires and oligarchs as well. But at the same time, having that focus really felt like a powerful message. And seeing videos of so many cities that I've spent time in and not truly turning up really lit up that Jupiter and Cancer homeland pride in me. I think sometimes Americans are, yeah, it's like embarrassing to be an American. Like, what are we doing, or what do we take for granted? And so just seeing people show up as our First Amendment rights really did it for me. And it felt very Jupiter in Cancer as well. And Jupiter in Cancer is now squaring Saturn in Aries. And so it is about how do you as an individual stand up, like take that to the next step beyond the collective homeland pride, I suppose. Planetary dances that illuminate Jupiter and Sagittarius. We had the Sagittarius full moon last week when Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So there was a lot of Jupiter energy in the sky over the past week. And these transits always make me feel a bit larger than life. Able to consider possibilities that lie beyond my normal horizons. And so last week was big time Jupiter Sag energy that expanded just about everything. And yeah, in my own personal world and with a lot of people I've talked to, there's this feeling of kind of like being able to zoom out and see the bigger picture a little bit, even though there's still so much to be done, one foot in front of the other. But that big energy kind of felt like a prelude to the main event of this week, which is the summer solstice. And the summer solstice is a big topic of conversation in this episode today as one of the main 4 points of the year. It is known as Litha in the pagan wheel of the year. So there's a pagan wheel celebration today. And it also corresponds with the emergence of Cancer season in the zodiac. So there's a lot of shifts happening in the cycles of time mandala this week. The transit of last weekend, was definitely intense. And there was and continues to be a kind of clash between impulsive action and a need for safety. And we're having to consider all the time kind of how we move and react and relate to the world around us. And so we're in heated times for sure, as we all know, that goes without saying. But this week continues with that theme. So this week begins with still majorly feeling the effects of those catalytic squares that I talked about, Uranus and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. And the sun is also continuing this week on its trip through the gate of caution, which is the final full gate of Gemini season. And then on Friday, the sun will travel into the gate of extremes, which is this heart-centered energy that rings in the solstice each year. It's always the solstice gate. And that changes the vibe up a bit as we enter the nurturing fierceness of Cancer season with both the sun and Jupiter in Cancer. For me, I find this solstice gate of extreme so serendipitous and fitting because it's the longest day and shortest night here in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's definitely a time of extremes, and it's known in the I Ching and the human design wheel as extremes. This gate is all about finding rhythm in the ups and downs and in the darks and lights of midsummer. And this gate of extremes is really mirroring the current astrology's tension between bold action and emotional retreat, which highlights this growing edge where radiant outward expression meets the need for internal balance. So this cusp week between Gemini and Cancer is kind of like this final culmination of Gemini energy, which is loud, it's chatty, it's confident, it's outward. And then we move into Cancer season, which is about inward reflection a little bit more. So before we get into the forecast today, I'll dive into each of these things a little bit more, but I wanted to first off invite you all to a couple of things. Next Wednesday, June 25th, is the Cancer Season Astro Breathwork Journey, and you can sign up for that on my website at astrosomatics.com. It's a monthly session that I do each month about the zodiac season, which is a great way to learn about the upcoming transits and kind of the archetypes and elemental wisdoms of the season. And then that's the first part where we kind of talk about the season. I do a little slideshow. And then for the second half of the 2-hour meeting, we do a conscious connected breathwork session that's about tapping into the wisdom of our bodies with the theme of care and nurturance for Cancer season ahead. So it's a really beautiful gathering, and I hope to see some of you there. Again, you can look at my Substack, cyclesoftime.substack.com for the link, or on my website at astrosomatics.com. And I'll post a link in the show notes as well to that breathwork session next Wednesday. Also, if you'd like to come to these breathwork sessions and kind of astro deep dives on a monthly basis, you can subscribe as a paid member to my Substack at cyclesoftime.substack.com. And as a paid member, it's the membership is called Embody the Revolution, and for only $8 a month, you can support my work and all of the hours that I put into putting these podcasts out every week, and also join in for these live calls, breathwork sessions, and I also do send out a monthly PDF guidebook that's about the season ahead and has it's packed with juicy details about the lots of different kind of unique elements of the season ahead, as well as journaling prompts. So it's a labor of love that I put into this. So if you become a paid subscriber, there's lots of goodies that come along with it. So you can subscribe there through Substack. And without further ado, we can get into the forecast now. This week in the Wheel of the Year, we are in the medicine wheel direction south, the whooshing 5-element cycle element of fire, the pagan season of Litha this week, midsummer. We will be celebrating Litha at the summer solstice, and I'll talk more about that later in the episode. Zodiac season, we're moving from Gemini into Cancer on June 20th. And the I Ching hexagrams and human design gates that the sun is transiting through this week are from last Saturday, the 14th, through Thursday, the 19th. We're in the gate of caution, and then we will move into the gate of extremes, which is known as modesty or humility in the I Ching. The moon phase is waning away from last week's Sagittarius full moon. And as far as other planetary dances, we have Mars entering Virgo this week on Tuesday, the 17th, and Jupiter in Cancer squaring off with Neptune in Aries on Wednesday, June 18th. And that's right after Jupiter in Cancer squared Saturn in Aries. So we still have both of those energies kind of in play. So it's a cautious beginning to the week. The gate of caution is still in full effect. And carrying on from last weekend, this week starts off with that note of precision that the gate of caution brings. The sun is moving through gate 12 in the human design mandala, and this gate is speaking to emotionally aligned expression. It's all about knowing when to speak, when to act, and when to wait. It's really like a point of stillness before an offering, which urges us not to waste our voice or our energy or our emotion until they are clear and true. It's also teaching us that pause isn't weakness, but rather it's discernment. So that will be in effect until Thursday. So it's from last Saturday until Thursday. And then on Friday, on the summer solstice, the sun will be entering the gate of extremes. So for the majority of the first part of this week, we are still in Gemini season and we are still experiencing that gate of caution. So on Tuesday, Mars enters Virgo, swapping the fiery impulse of Leo for a grounded strategy. And Mars at the 29th degree of Leo was squaring Uranus at the 27th through 29th degree of Taurus. and really highlighting that fixed kind of tension, fixed sign tension. But now it's moving into Virgo and really bringing more of that clipboard and checklist energy of Virgo, where the energy is more about fixing and refining and purifying and less about just bold, expressive Martian qualities. There might be a sudden urge that you feel with this transit to kind of clean everything up or edit the details or finally take action on something that you've been meaning to improve. So I think it's a welcome change after Mars has been transiting through Leo for quite some time. Mars doesn't necessarily love being in Virgo, but I think after such expressive Martian energy over the past little while, it'll be nice for Mars to be in a little bit more of a subdued, organized sign, perhaps. By Wednesday, Jupiter in Cancer is squaring Neptune in Aries, and this is kind of intensifying and shifting up the energy of last Sunday's square between Jupiter and Saturn. So again, Neptune and Saturn are both in Aries. They've both entered Aries fairly recently, the first degree of the whole zodiac. And Jupiter again just entered Cancer last week, and so we have these planets in a square to each other. And the Neptune influence really could stir the emotional waters a bit and blur the edges of clarity. We had this Saturn and Jupiter, which again is kind of about this tension between responsibility and making sure that things have certain boundaries and structures around them so that they can expand. It's this kind of back and forth dialogue. But Neptune is bringing emotionality and a wateriness into it. Neptune being ruled by Poseidon, the king of the deep. And so this could be deeply inspiring. Neptune is about dreams and inspiration, but it also is kind of about delusion as well. And so it could feel either inspiring or misleading, kind of depending on whether you're acting from intuition or illusion. Jupiter wants to grow and Neptune wants transcendence, and neither one of those tends to be great at boundaries, but boundaries are the realm of Saturn, who's also in the picture at this point. So, it's a bit soupy. It's a bit of this big, expansive, transcendent, dreamy nature that's really being highlighted, but then we still have Saturn there saying like, hey guys, we got to put some boxes around this at the same time. So there's a lot of conflicting energies that could make us be very philosophical, I suppose. It could really bring a lot of Jupiter is the great philosopher, and so I feel like Jupiter squaring both Saturn and Neptune could bring a lot of philosophical discourse on how to dream and also be realistic, and how to not get lost in illusion, but to use that Saturnian influence for putting some guidelines surrounding how we're going to achieve those dreams. So with Mars in Virgo early this week, the key here is my favorite Virgo word, which is discernment. With that Saturn square as well as Mars entering Virgo, there's a bit more discerning energy. And so we can take action and wax poetic on our wildest Jupiterian dreams, but also, meanwhile, checking our motives, checking the facts, and not believing every lofty vision unless it also holds water this week. So there's a temptation with Jupiter energy to get lost, and Neptune energy as well, to kind of get lost in the sea or in the expanse of space and in the vast possibilities that are out there. And Mars in Virgo, and then that Saturn square kind of bringing us back to Earth, providing a tether as well. And so it's a good balance. I find that it'll be a good balance this week to not get too out to sea. This week before the summer solstice arrives, it's definitely a good time to slow down and feel things through before committing. It's a good week to get clear on what's real and what's wishful thinking and what's just in need of a little structure to bloom. I also like thinking about Cancer as, as we're entering Cancer season, as a sign that is about having some kind of structure so that something beautiful can bloom out of it. I think about Gemini as the buzzing bees, the pollinators, as I've said many times before, the butterflies, the hummingbirds, communicative pollinators during late spring. And then as we enter midsummer and into Cancer season, I like to think of the bees going back into their little hive and chilling out, getting out of the hot, midsummer sun. And that's where the honey gets created, is inside the hive. So it's about kind of bringing in everything that we've gathered during Gemini season and really putting it together into this kind of magical process that happens inside of a structure. Similarly, Cancer is a cardinal water sign, and so I think of it as a wellspring, like a spring that is coming out of the earth, and that's contained in the earth first before it springs outward. And so it's all about this containment in order to bloom. So that makes us ready, all of these converging forces will prepare us for some radiant solstice celebrations that can give praise to the flowers that are already blossoming and the fruits that are already popping out on the vine this time of year. So by the end of this week, we're entering that solstice energy that will be a little more liberating than the kind of philosophical and structured, kind of like weighing both sides energy of the first part of the week. So this Thursday marks the solstice, the longest day and the shortest night here in the Northern Hemisphere. And this is a sacred hinge in the wheel of the year when the sun pauses at its furthest point before beginning its return. It is this moment of light. It's a beautiful moment of surrendering to the light before the days start getting shorter again. And each year, the sun transits through gate 15 in human design at the time of the solstice. And this, again, is the gate of extremes. Like all solstice and equinox gates, gate 15 lives in the G center. The G center is like the center point of the human design body graph. It is the seat of identity and direction and love. It's a heart center, and it's right below the throat and above the solar plexus, and it's where all of the solstice, equinox, and cross quarter gates live in the human design body graph. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to note, that all of these pivotal days in the pagan wheel of the year and the astrological calendar, the equal days, the longest days and shortest nights, and the days halfway between them are all located in this G center. And so this gate is part of the channel of rhythm, and it's concerned with biorhythms and the flow of life and the wisdom that is gained from living in natural cycles. It really has this energy of magnetism through rhythm, and it expresses as a deep connection to chaotic and undomesticated rhythms of life. It's not a gate of predictability or consistency, but it's a gate of kind of wild time and of people who rise and fall with the moon, or eat breakfast at midnight, or feel alive when the rest of the world is asleep. It's really this energy of inviting us in to love the irregular and the nonlinear, and just what it means to be a human animal. In the I Ching, this gate is known as modesty or humility, and this might seem a little bit different than extremes, but it's all about kind of recognizing that the extremes of the season, the extreme heat, the extreme light, is something that we have to be aligned with. It helps us align with the greater flow of life. It's noticing that, like, when we're in rhythm with life, we are not controlling it, but we are surrendering to the dance of movement and stillness and light and dark and action and rest. And it's really this longest day that can give us a lot of insight by just inviting us to pause and to recognize that this is a major point in the revolution of the Earth around the sun, where we all are saying, okay, this is the time when we're at this turning point. The days have been getting longer and longer and longer, and now they're going to start getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And it's really like walking on top of a wheel where you have to continue walking or else you'll fall off. Like, you have to stay in motion. You have to stay in rhythm. And so it is about being humble or modest within that, like recognizing that we're a part of something much larger than ourselves, part of larger rhythms than our own selves. And sometimes those rhythms feel extreme, but we have to keep going. In the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd describes the shadow of this key as extremism. And this is where irregularity turns into instability or rejection of order. And at the gift level, gate 15 becomes magnetism, which is about drawing others in, being a magnetic force, not through an actual forcing of something, but instead through attuning in an embodied way to the pulse of life itself. And the city level is fluorescence, which is the flowering of life itself through the total acceptance of every strange and perfect rhythm. The word fluorescence, when I first heard this, I was like, that's so cool. I've never thought of I think of a fluorescent light, right? But the word fluorescence is about blooming. It's like fluorescence is this act of blooming like a flower. And I just thought that was such a beautiful image of something fluorescent, like neon almost, is that quality of just aliveness and vibrancy. But fluorescence, flowers blooming are the same kind of quality. And it's this notion that you cannot force a flower to bloom. At this time of year, there's a lot of flowers blooming in midsummer, and it's about pausing and recognizing like the bounty of the sun on this longest day, and also like the bounty of the flowers, the fluorescence around us that we cannot force to happen at a single moment, but it's because we are in touch with this pulse and rhythm of life that we're able to participate in that beautiful fluorescence and notice that this is the time when lots of flowers are starting to bloom. And so it's really about coming to terms with the extremes of life as beautiful forces, and remembering that nature thrives through diversity and that wholeness comes from inclusion and not from uniformity. It's not about fitting into a normal rhythm, but really just finding your own rhythm and honoring it. So whether you're a midnight person or a midnight owl, the solstice invites you to stop trying to make sense in a linear time fashion and instead really listen to your own pulse and recognize that you weren't meant to bloom if you haven't bloomed yet. And if you've already bloomed, you don't need to bloom again. You know, it's about paying attention to your own natural rhythm and working with the Earth's natural rhythms rather than against them. Richard Rudd describes this gene key of extremes as being in deep harmony with Gaia herself, and saying those that have this energy in their body graph or in their chart can bring a kind of timeless beauty into the world through the ability to move with the Earth's natural rhythms instead of against them. So this is a very beautiful moment to ask yourself at the summer solstice, which part of you or what parts of you are ready to bloom wildly without apology, and what needs to be surrendered back into the soil and composted for another cycle. It's time to let the longest light illuminate your extremes and help you love the whole strange, beautiful pattern that you are. It's almost like the light is shining for the longest time out of the year today, and it's like, let that light shine on all of you and on all of your irregularities and inconsistencies as well as the world's, and just accept it for this brief moment in time before we start preparing for winter. And instead of anticipating this longest day, we're in this moment, this kind of like pause and stand still. So one thing to note is that the Gate of Extremes is the first of 8 trigrams of 8 gates in the human design system where the lower trigram is mountain. So each hexagram or each gate in the I Ching is made up of 2 trigrams stacked on top of each other, and that creates a hexagram in the ancient I Ching. And the lower trigram is the same for 8 in a row as we go around the Fuxi sequence of the I Ching, which is on the human design mandala. And so we've just come out of the Earth trigram, which is a lower trigram for the past 8 gates. And now as we move into extremes, we're moving into mountain being the lower trigram. And this is kind of this underlying transpersonal energy for the next 8 gates, which is just about the almost 8 weeks. So mountain is a powerful symbol of stillness and endurance and containment in the I Ching. And this lower mountain trigram suggests an inner foundation that holds firm, even when the upper trigram stretches wide to accommodate vast diversity and contrast. So this hexagram is Earth over mountain, and this really gives Gate 15 a unique flavor in this new elemental season, as it is anchored in a deep internal steadiness, this lower trigram of mountain, but it expresses variation in rhythm and emotion and behavior, but it's still anchored down below. So Gate 15, Gate of Extremes, the summer solstice, teaches us that true magnetism comes from humbly honoring both stillness and flux, and knowing when to bend and when to remain rooted, and really just being part of that pulse of time. It's a threshold gate that really initiates us into living as a part of the larger ecological rhythm without losing our core. So that is the solstice gate every summer, Gate 15. It's a really interesting one to contemplate. Moving on a little bit to the pagan wheel of the year. Midsummer is known as Litha, and it is an ancient festival that marks the summer solstice in this pagan wheel of the year. It's been celebrated across Europe and many parts of the world, and it's a solar festival that honors the zenith of sun's power. In the old Celtic and Germanic calendars, this moment was revered as a time of fullness and abundance and protection. And during this celebration, bonfires were lit on hilltops to strengthen the sun for the second half of the year and to kind of be in reciprocity with that solar energy. And there was oftentimes lots of herbs gathered on this day, which were believed to be at their height of their potency for medicine and food. In Norse mythology, solstice, summer solstice, marked a sacred marriage between the divine masculine and feminine. And in Slavic traditions, the holiday of Kupula night, which is aligned with the solstice, would feature ritual bathing and flower wreaths and jumping over fire. And similar to the Celtic origins as well, the summer solstice around the world in the Northern Hemisphere had very similar rituals as symbols of purification and fertility. In Druidic and pagan circles, stone circles like Stonehenge were constructed to align with the rising sun on Litha morning. And this really shows the reverence for this cosmic turning point that goes back thousands of years, if not much longer. At its core, Litha is a celebration of life at full bloom, the extreme light and fluorescence of the year, to tie it back into the human design and the I Ching. It's when the crops are growing and the animals are fat with summer grazing, and the earth herself feels really pregnant with potential. But as we know, as the light reaches its peak, the solstice also marks this subtle shift that from now on the days will slowly become shorter and shorter. And so this, again, is this threshold moment where this fullness and abundance is coexisting with the impermanence of that culmination, and maturity begins to lean toward harvest. In the tropical zodiac, each year the sun enters Cancer simultaneously with Litha and the solstice. So Cancer season always begins on the summer solstice in the tropical zodiac, and the winter season always begins with Capricorn season or the winter solstice. And this really anchors the summer solstice shift into this deeply maternal, emotional, and watery kind of signature. It is, like I mentioned earlier, the bees going into the hive after they've been out buzzing around. It's the crab kind of going into its shell. And like we think about the sun is at its peak, the day is long. It's a long day to be out in the sun all day, buzzing around. It's time now to recognize that, oh, this is beginning of an inward time, a time of preparation as the seasons shift. Cancer is the womb of the zodiac, and it's this sacred shell where life is gestated and memory is held and safety is created. And Cancer is all about emotion and the ancestral line and the instinct to protect and nurture the things that we have gathered together in Gemini season. And we just finishing up Gemini season, this really outward season that's buzzing with curiosity and movement. And we're about to enter on the solstice this more inward season that is more about feeling and family and embodiment and not rushing around, but really like paying attention to the crops around us that are just ripening on their own terms. The flowers are blooming on their own terms. Fruit is ripening on its own terms. You've planted the seeds, you've pollinated, you've done all of the different things over this winter and spring that's action. But then you reach the solstice and you recognize, oh wow, there's nothing I can do here in this ecological sense. It's already in motion and it's happening in its due time. And so I like to think of that nurturance of Cancer, that archetype, as really something that comes from how we have to nurture and tend to the ripening plants as they're growing. It's a very subtle, gentle nurturance of making sure that we're watering the plants. We're making sure that we're still, as agriculturalists or gardeners, thinking about this season as like, it's no longer as fragile or as volatile as it once was. It's kind of coming into its fullness of the summer garden. But so you're kind of tending to more things. You're looking around saying, oh, is that fruit ripe? Is that like, does that need to be picked? Do I need to clear this out of the way? But it's a gentle and subtle nurturing to something that is already alive in its own right. So I think that that's really beautiful. And I think that Cancer teaches us that growth begins with just holding space for what is already emerging and noting that nothing really meaningful blooms without that emotional tending to space. Jupiter this year, as I mentioned in the intro, joins the sun in Cancer, and this begins a year-long transit that amplifies Cancer's intuitive, protective, and creative powers. Jupiter here just adds to what we know about Cancer season. It expands and blesses not just what we do, but how deeply we care. And I feel like Jupiter in Cancer is kind of like a cosmic permission slip to slow down and root into place and tend to the inner world in this very broadly nurturing way. Because our capacity to expand begins with how safely we can be in our own bodies and in our own hearts. So Jupiter just entered Cancer about a week ago, last week from this recording, and it is also currently transiting through the gate of extremes, which is expanding our collective desire to embrace extremities and embrace volatility and the kind of excitement of solstice season. And so Jupiter will stay there until June 20th. And as you probably know, Jupiter takes about a year to move through a single sign in the zodiac. It takes 12 years to orbit the sun, so a whole year to go through a single sign. So Jupiter will be in Cancer for the whole next year, and it'll spend longer time in each gate than the sun does, about 25 to 30 days in each gate of Cancer season. So I mention this just to highlight the fact that as we progress through Cancer season this year, it might be nice to pay special attention to these gates and these, I like to call the gates micro seasons of the season of the zodiac season. And because they're kind of foreshadowing things as the sun moves through these gates, and I talk about it on a week by week basis, it's also going to be foreshadowing some things that might be expanded upon over the coming year as Jupiter also travels through these gates at a much slower rate. So I'll try to highlight which gate of Cancer that Jupiter is entering, because I think the time frame for that is really interesting. And again, if you want to get more in-depth reading about kind of how this affects your chart, I have openings on my website at astrosomatics.com for personal readings and deep dives into your astrology and human design charts to look at like where these different planetary transits are hitting your chart and how that's related to your human design. So it's kind of a fun way to get even more personal with this stuff. I recommend over the summer solstice, really just taking a moment to pause. I have on the Substack at cyclesoftime.substack.com a somatic practice called womb bowl breathing that is a good one to practice because Cancer is associated with the womb and the beehive and this kind of the crab shell and this place of nurturance within and kind of inward interoceptive wisdom. And you can read that there. It's a really simple practice that's all about filling your womb area, whether you have a womb or not, filling that space in the center of your being with golden light or moonlit water or whatever image that would be nourishing to really breathe deep into that womb space during Cancer season. And that's a practice that I'm going to be coming back to again and again. You can kind of read that out on the Substack if you'd like a little bit more details about that. But it's all about filling your vessel and entering Cancer season, entering this longest day with a deep appreciation for the light and a deep appreciation for the water and a deep appreciation for the containment of life itself, how the world keeps on turning, and that we don't have to do anything in that moment. So I do hope that you can take the solstice to pause and reflect and nourish yourself, eat good food, gather some wildflowers or some herbs, get out into nature. This is a really beautiful week to slow down a little bit, and be in that pulse and rhythm of the natural world. So thank you so much for listening. Stay with the courage of your heart as we move through these extreme times. And I will be here with you again next week. The sun is moving into the gate of stillness, which is a nice kind of point to land after the extremes of the solstice, which can be an exciting time. And we're definitely living, as Confucius said, in interesting times and lots of energy to contend with. So next week, we have the gate of stillness to anticipate, this mountain over mountain gate that's all about just being still. And so if you'd like to find out more about my offerings, you can find me at astrosomatics.com. I'm on Instagram at Cycles of Time Podcast and astro.somatics, or you can subscribe either as a free or paid subscriber at cyclesoftime.substack.com to get this podcast in your inbox every Monday, as well as journaling prompts and a monthly guidebook and invitations to some beautiful events as well as part of that paid membership. So if you're listening on another platform, I would really love any reviews you could give me to help me continue to extend my reach with this work. And just click the 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever it is that you're listening. Really, really appreciate it. And I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful solstice up ahead. And I'll talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.